Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Sue Varma, live talking to Medscape. So excited that we are having this conversation today. Um, I am Dr. Sue Varma. I see folks joining. Hello, hello, hello to all our friends from all over the world. How wonderful it is that this Tuesday morning for me, I'm on the East Coast in the United States, and I know that we have friends from all over the globe. So I love talking to our very brilliant Medscape audience of healthcare professionals or just people who really are interested in science and credible, reliable information. And I follow Medscape and I love all the articles. So I'm very honored to be able to continue speaking with you. My last few talks have been on high functioning anxiety, high functioning depression, and as you know, one of your favorite docs here, Dr. Drew Ramsey, had invited me several weeks ago to talk about healthcare professional burnout and healthcare professional mental health. So please feel free to check out all of those talks. I'm Dr. Sue Varma. You can follow me on Instagram as well. I provide a lot of mental health education and mental health awareness. And today's talk is on optimism. And this is a talk that is extremely near and dear to my heart. And the reason that it is because I used to work with the 9/11 mental health program as the medical director, and I was working with victims of trauma. And one of the key features of resilience, believe it or not, is optimism. So that is a topic. I want to make sure that you can all hear me. If you can't, somebody message me, tell me that you can't hear me, but I'm assuming that you can. And I am excited to be talking to you. I see a lot of people waving and saying hello, and I want to say greetings and welcome to my friends from all over the globe. So if you can't hear me, you let me know. I hear thumbs up, so I feel like we're good. Okay, so one thing that I want to make it very clear about optimism is we are not talking about this sort of naive attitude and outlook. I very much recognize that we are dealing with a global pandemic and that having a positive attitude might sound like what we're calling positive toxic positivity. And that's not what this is about. I'm not telling people that despite all the things that are going on in your life, and by the way, let's list all those things that are going on in the world, which is unemployment, illness from COVID, death, loss, grief, job loss. Now parents are contending, and I'm a parent as well, about what to do with schools and do we send our kids? What's the latest science? Are kids going to be safe there? Are they going to be spreading? Are teachers feeling safe? So in general, safety and certainty is at stake here, right? So you might be thinking, my God, this doctor is nuts if she's going to talk to me about optimism because I'm feeling anything but. And I'll say to you, you are not alone because we're all feeling a heightened sense of stress and anxiety. And believe it or not, regardless of what you had been going through on in your life before this, let's say you were someone who never had anxiety or depression, you might say that I'm feeling it now. And in fact, in some surveys, 70 to 80% of people are feeling increased stress, increased anxiety, increased pressure. So all of this is telling me that I have to put that hat back on, and I have of working with folks who have experienced great trauma. We're trying to prevent people from experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder, and only a small percentage of the population will go through loss and experience post-traumatic stress disorder. So believe it or not, anywhere from 50 to 80% of people will experience a life-threatening situation in their life, and only 8% will develop PTSD. But what other conditions can we get? Anxiety, depression, pessimism, work burnout, relationship problems, loss of employment because of the mental health challenges we're facing, acute stress reaction, as one of our colleagues is bringing out, absolutely, and I want to get to that. Acute stress reaction is often time limited, doesn't necessarily turn into post-traumatic stress disorder, and has many of the similar overlap symptoms, such as hypervigilance, looking for threat, nightmares, intrusive thoughts, reliving a negative experience, images about something, numbness, avoidance, being checked out. So a lot of that sort of overlaps with post-traumatic stress disorder. Some of you might be able to relate to some aspect of it, but really what this talk about is not so much about the disorders, because I've talked about high-functioning anxiety and high-functioning depression. We've talked about mental health in providers. But today I want to talk to you about positive psychiatry. And what's really funny is those two words never really seemed to go together in my mind a long time ago, right? Because what is so positive about psychiatry? Psychiatry is about illness. And as doctors and as healthcare professionals, we want to take back health into our hands, because really that's what this is about, right? It's about promoting health and wellness and giving people tools for prevention. And one thing that I'm really grateful for, having grown up in a family with an Eastern background, is so much emphasis is put on prevention, which I'm grateful for, because I'm able to combine sort of Eastern medicine in my mind and my upbringing, being exposed and practicing in the family, and then also Western allopathic medicine, because I was trained and born and raised in the United States. So having sort of multiple cultural backgrounds had been helpful for me. And we also know that mindfulness-based stress reduction, MBSR, or mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, has roots in sort of some of this Eastern wisdom of looking at meditation. Meditation is a part of what I want to talk about in terms of the optimism umbrella. So let me back up for a second and talk about resilience, because when I was working, just to give you a little idea, it was a multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary program where mental health was integrated into the fold of primary care and all the other medical specialists. So folks who had been living or exposed to the aftermath of 9/11, and they were rescue, recovery, cleanup workers, frontline responders, New York Police Department, FDNY, and then the residents who were living down there. Anybody who felt that they had symptoms, respiratory symptoms, allergies they had developed, cough, pneumonia, some even cancer, would come in for a full day of screening. And that would include a mental health evaluation, depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, domestic violence, substance abuse. We would ask them questions. And I was always curious about who are the folks that, you know, sort of didn't have some of these sequelae. And what I found was a few things. And then I went into the literature about resilience and to understand key components of resilience. Optimism is one part of it. Having a sense of humor was a big part of it. Having a social support system, cognitive flexibility, altruism, and a moral compass. So all of these things put together made somebody naturally more resilient. But I'm not just interested in what you came to the table with, right? Because if you're born resilient, if you're born buoyant, if you're born optimistic, good for you. You're ahead of the game, and keep it. And spread the word about what it is that you do naturally, and the rest of us can then learn from you. So, am I a natural born optimist? I don't know, but I know what I am, which is what I want to talk to you about, is this concept of practical optimism, which is taking what we know about the science and the wisdom behind optimism and applying it to everyday life. And in my practice, I'm a cognitive behavioral therapist, and so much of cognitive behavioral therapy is about applying a certain mindset to adversity. So while there is a pandemic, now more than ever, we need a list of tools. We need a list of what we call a distress tolerance toolkit. We need to have coping mechanisms. We need to be able to self-soothe. We need to be able to change the way we think, to be able to change the way we deal with the external environment. All of the stresses that we were once dealing with at baseline have now magnified and elevated. If you're dealing with an employer in a healthcare situation, we were fighting about PPE, we were fighting about how to keep people safe. We didn't want to get infected, we didn't want to get our patients infected, and we don't want to get our families infected, and we were dealing with contending with having to choose between the self and other. And when you're in the healthcare profession, you're often used to caring about and putting other people first. So coming back to optimism, optimism is not a naivete. It doesn't say you're abdicating responsibility. It's not saying, oh yes, there's no coronavirus. We don't need to wear masks. Like, go out in the world, be free, do you. That's not what I'm saying at all. Practical optimism is using science, using good judgment, using wisdom, but also hoping for a positive outcome. So that's the key here, is that when there are multiple outcomes to choose from, practical optimism says, what do I need to do to get the best outcome of this situation, my intended outcome, right? And also recognizing all the features that you're contending with. Now, I'm talking about positive psychiatry, but positive psychiatry has its roots in positive psychology. And what I love about positive psychology and the work of one of the pioneers, or the pioneer in the field, Martin Seligman, is that his work, believe it or not, began in learned helplessness, pessimism, and depression. And it was out of that he's like, wait a minute, what am I really talking about here? So I want to give you a little bit about that and say that, believe it or not, it's not enough to score high on an optimism scale. And there are certain key questions that we can ask people, and I'll share that with you in a minute. But a lot of it has to do with outlook. How do you envision the future? What do you attribute positive things in your life to? Do you take responsibility for the positive things or not? So it's not just about, do you have an optimistic outlook? You also have to be, in an ideal situation, low on the pessimism scale. So I'm going to talk about what pessimism is. And I just gave a talk earlier this morning for CBS This Morning talking about work burnout. And one of the key features and hallmarks of work burnout is a feeling of cynicism and a feeling of what I do doesn't matter in the world, and a feeling of pessimism and hopelessness in a way, and giving up and feeling mentally exhausted. So all of this ties in, right? Like, I want to help you be better in not only your personal lives, to feel better about your mental health in general, but also optimism, practical optimism, is a way to prevent work burnout. And it's a way to improve your relationships with people. It's a way to thrive. It's a way to finally check off those boxes in your life of things that you wanted to accomplish, whether it be travel, whether it be relationship goals, whether it be, writing a book, whether it be giving talks, like whatever it is that you want to do. So practical optimism to me is practical, it's tangible, it's take home, it's things you can do every day, it's things you can do right now, things that you can implement today. And there are not many things in life that someone's going to give you a talk and you're going to walk away and say, well, I can actually use this today. So I want to talk to you about the 3 P's of pessimism. And so while we want to improve and increase your optimism score, we also want to simultaneously decrease your pessimism score. And I just want to let you know that today I am giving a talk on optimism, and it is just a primer. This is just a basic. I hope that we'll have another chance. Call this Optimism 101. We'll do 102 next time. So don't feel as if, and this video will be here, and you can follow me on my Instagram at Dr. Sue Varma, and I'm going to give more information on optimism. But I just want to plant these seeds, and then we'll have more of a richer dialogue. The other thing I want to say is that all of this is based on science. In fact, there was some information, a study in JAMA that was looking, it was a meta-analysis, and it found that optimism leads to longevity, that leads to decreased cardiac incidents, to have less strokes. So optimism really does not only promote the quality of your life, but we found that studies in which people were recovering, let's say from breast cancer, it was not enough to just be an optimist, but those who were also low on pessimism had quicker recovery. We see that optimism can boost your immune system. So there's a variety of things that are going on in the brain, in the body, whether it be from from an aging point of view. We know that when we look at chromosomes and telomeres, that the shortening of the telomeres usually have to do with aging, and we see that people who practice meditation or who feel a sense of purpose in life, which is a big part of optimism, have less of this aging on a sort of genetic DNA level. So there's a lot of science behind it. We can talk more about that, the specific studies, but I want to leave you with some practical, tangible tips. So the 3 P's of pessimism are: when something negative happens, let's say you got a bad test on a score, you're taking your board exam or you're retaking your board exam, a 10 years recertification as we had in psychiatry, and I took them a couple of years ago. The 3 P's of pessimism is: do you take things personally when negative things happen? Do you take them as being pervasive, as in all aspects of your life? And do you think that they're permanent? So ask yourself the next time, and keep that in the back of your mind when you're feeling down, when something negative, when there's been a negative outcome in your life. Ask yourself, am I engaging in the 3 P's of pessimism? And I would flip it and then say, okay, well, am I an optimist? What would I consider myself? I would ask you the same 3 questions. When positive things happen in your life, do you take credit for them? Do you say, hey, yeah, I worked really hard for that test, or I deserve it? So do you take credit? Do you take it personally? Do you think that the positive things that happen in your life were just one isolated incident? Oh, I just got lucky. Most people who are not optimists will say, I just got lucky. It had nothing to do with me. The test was easy. I'm not a smart person. I'm not very good at what I do. It was just the test. The other thing is, do you look at it as being indicative of who you are and the success in your life? Be like, yeah, I did well on the test because I'm generally speaking a hardworking person. Is that what you say to yourself? And do you look at it as being permanent, or do you say, no, this was just one isolated incident. I did well on this test, but who knows, I'm going to fail in the future. And if we do another talk on optimism, I will talk to you about my personal experience being an undergrad and taking organic chemistry, and how practical optimism helped me from potentially maybe failing the class to getting an A+ and being one of the only women. I was told, my teacher was a little bit sexist, unfortunately, and he said that women never got organic chemistry and they don't understand it, they don't have the visual spatial reasoning, and no woman has ever gotten an A in 20 years. And myself and 2 female friends of mine were like, we're going to change that. And we did certain things because we had that practical optimism attitude. We confronted the teacher, we had a nice conversation, and suddenly he was able to teach properly and offer a test that was reflective of the material. So I think I was only maybe 19 at the time, but I realized that my future of whether I was going to become a doctor or not depended on this class. We ended up getting A's and we ended up tutoring it. And so I do love teaching, and I'll share that with you, but my dream of becoming a psychiatrist, which I've had my whole life, wasn't going to happen. I wasn't going to be sitting here in front of you if I didn't employ these practical optimist tips, which were basically that if you don't do well on a test, are you going to blame yourself? Are you going to personalize it? Are you going to say, oh, I'm just not cut out for the sciences? Because I easily could have gone down that road and said that this isn't meant for me, right? One low score does not mean that your life is over. One bad outcome in your life, if you're working in a job and perhaps you had a critical incident with a patient, do you personalize yourself? Do you blame yourself? Do you beat yourself up? Or do you give yourself grace and compassion and say, I had a bad day, there were certain circumstances. Now, I want to be clear, I'm not promoting sort of narcissistic, sociopathic thinking that dismisses responsibility, that says, everything is everybody else's fault. If this didn't work out, it wasn't my fault, it was bad luck. Not at all. So it's a very specific set of circumstances for very specific people. This doesn't necessarily work for everybody. You have to have an open mind. You have to be willing to look at yourself. You have to have self-awareness. You have to be able to have self-reflection to be able to use this, and you have to take responsibility. You have to take inventory of what you've done wrong, and you have to be able to be real with yourself. But part of being real with yourself is taking responsibility for the good things in your life. So mastery is a big part of it. So this is an area that I'm working on in my practice. It's an area that I'm starting to write about, and there are sort of 8 key features. I want to have a discussion with you. Hopefully we can have a follow-up about what these 8 key features of practical optimism are, but I want to leave you with those 3 P's of pessimism, because you can flip them and you could think of them as the 3 P's of optimism: is permanent, pervasive, or personal. So when bad things happen, do you look at it as it's my fault? It's enduring, it will always last this way? Or do you say it was an isolated incident, it could have happened to anybody, and when good things happen, do you say, no, I worked hard for it? This idea of locus of control is a big thing, or attribution style. So optimism can be seen as a dispositional style, that this is just somebody who you are, this is what you're born with, and it's done before you're even born, or when you're born, this is your personality and you're set with it. And then it's also an attributional style, is how do you explain things, an explanatory style. And that is something where I, as a cognitive behavioral therapist, work with people to say, yes, your tendency is to want to blame yourself and to say that it's your fault and that it's going to last forever and nothing positive will ever come of this for you. Or you can change the meaning, you can change the explanation, and you can say, no, I deserved the raise that I got, and I can say that I have good things in my life because of who I am. I have good relationships. I have good friendships because of the person that I am. So self-esteem is a big part of it. People who are practical optimists have or work on their self-esteem. They practice healthful habits. We know that optimists are more likely to exercise. They are less likely to smoke. They care about their health. And they care about other people. If you're able to connect what you're doing, altruism is a big part of resilience, but I think also practical optimism is where you're able to translate and say, if I'm doing something good for somebody, that's good for me too, and vice versa. So again, mask wearing, all of that, hand washing, when we were able to connect what we're doing and saying that it's benefiting others and saving lives, we are more likely to do it. Optimistic or practical optimism are very people-oriented people. They have purpose. They're very good problem solvers. So I'm just giving you a teaser, and hopefully I'll be able to come back and talk to you again about this sort of 8-step plan that I have created, that from being a psychiatrist, being a physician, I don't know, it's been a lot. I don't want to date myself, but I've been a psychiatrist for at least 13 years and a doctor maybe 17 years. And I've been reading a lot. And so that other people don't have to do all the grunt work that I'm doing, but so that I can distill the information of the stuff that I do with my practice and bring tangible tips to people. So that was Optimism 101. It's a primer. It's a lot of information. You will follow us later here on Medscape for the story, and hopefully I'll come back and then tell you about this 8-step plan that you can use in your life. But I'm leaving you again with the 3 P's of pessimism, but flip them on their head and make them the 3 P's of optimism. Learned Optimism is a great book by Martin Seligman, the father of positive psychology. There's a book called Positive Psychiatry by Dr. Dilip Juste, who was one of the former APA presidents. Positive Psychiatry was one of his missions that year. And I'm a big believer now in my practice to not only treat people from getting depressed to undepressed, but getting them to being fabulous. And I know that that's not a medical term, but you heard it here on Medscape. Our goal is getting you fabulous, not just undepressed. Optimal mental health, optimal functioning. And in the end, I think that any doctor would agree that we want to optimize, and that there is no health without mental health, and that physical health and mental health are integrated. I'm going to leave you with one further thought, is that if you put we in wellness, we can turn illness to wellness by putting we. So this is something that we have to do together as a community for wellness. So I will leave you on that. Thank you, my dear, dear, dear friends. Please keep an eye out. I hope to be back here in a couple of weeks to be able to talk to you about Optimism 102 and those 8 steps. Be well. Follow Medscape. Follow me, Dr. Sue Varma, on Instagram. And I hope to be able to continue to give you robust content that you can use in your life that's scientific and credible. Thank you.